Some time ago, I challenged myself to build one deck for each single monocolor. I got tired when I got it right and I haven't continued the effort since, but that's a story I will talk about another time. I got white, blue, and I finally got to green. I was totally empty-headed there. I used to dislike green, the drop fetish bit faces gameplay was never really my jam, and I was having such a hard time finding a green deck that I liked at a budget I felt was okay. Looking at you, mono green lens decks. Then one day, last year, I was hanging around over to 33x's Discord server, and I asked for some suggestions. Somebody there suggested trying out Peregrin Took for a mono green token stack. I said, well, why not? I honestly do not remember what that was. Please, if you are there listening, show yourself, so I can thank you again, because not only did I try it, but it's now one of my favorite decks. Which is ironically unfortunate, considering I definitely dislike both Lord of the Rings and Universes Beyond as a concept. But anyway, without further ado, let's take a look at it, shall we? Peregrin Took, 2 generic and a green for a 2-3 Halfling Citizen with one of my favorite effects in Magic, a replacement effect. Whenever you would create one or more tokens of any kind, Peregrin Took will add in a food token on top of that. That's good enough, but that's not all. By sacrificing 3 foods, Peregrin Took will let you draw a card at instant speed on top of that. It's no secret that having a card advantage engine in the command zone is incredibly strong, and it's no exception here. Unsurprisingly, those food tokens are rarely used for gaining life. Draw cards, use them as mana rocks, turn them into centaurs, pump your creatures, filter lands, pick your favorite. After all, foods are just another resource to accumulate and spend here. Don't get lost in the sauce though. Food is not directly the win condition. Green's got a green, am I right? Saplings, elves, Eldrazi spawns, insects, cats, the more the merrier. This is a token stack. The plan is simple, flood the board, pump your creatures and eat hard. Just with a bit of bluish gameplay thrown in. So, we need to create some tokens. That's why at the time of recording this deck runs 38 cards capable of creating them, spacing from one-shot effects stapled onto other utilities to more consistent engines. Take Tendershoot Dryad for instance. With Peregrin Took out, it will get you a Saproling and a foot on each upkeep, your opponents included, netting at least 1 card per turn rotation if you are going to sacrifice those to Pippin's effect. I want to emphasize at least because this deck is a replacement effect festival. Little refresh on replacement effects in case you needed one. They are not triggered abilities. They take the reference text of an effect as it resolves and replace it with what is indicated. They apply in the order chosen by the affected player, which in all the cases of this deck is yourself. Now that we are all on board with this, Parallel Lives and Primal Vigor double the token production. Don't worry, you will most likely be the one gaining the greatest advantage from the latter. Quina, Kugurme and Stridengar Automaton work the same way as Peregrin Took does, but creating creature tokens instead. Those flying topters in particular will be precious to defend from flying attackers. I could not exclude Academy Manufacture, I already own one from an old deck of mine and its effect is too tempting to leave out. Just keep in mind this is a removal magnet and will put a giant target on your head. Play at your own risk. These replacement effects can easily spiral out of control. Remember, again, that you can choose the order in which they apply, so always make sure to double after adding. Imagine controlling all of the above plus Peregrin Took and then creating a Saproling token with Tendershoot Dryad. At each upkeep you will get 1 Saproling, 1 food, which is replaced by 1 food, 1 treasure and 1 clue, 1 frog, 1 topter, which then get doubled and then doubled again. My usual playgroup rarely lets me get to this point, yet let me say a partial setup is not that unusual. What's important is trying to create the least number of tokens the most often you can. Took doesn't care whether you create 1 or 50 tokens at once, it will always add a single food. In other words, 10 tokens at once bad, a single token 10 times good. We can get creative with this. Take Chittering Dispatcher. We have 3 instances of token creation here, the first one from the Myriad trigger, creating 2 tokens, and then 2 separate instances for each of the Myriad copies leaving the battlefield. Took intervenes at each of those triggers, leaving me with 2 Eldrazi spawns and 3 foods. There are other similar cases, like Meriadoc Brandybuck, who will create a separate trigger for each player being attacked by a halfling. This also applies to modal spells with multiple choices, like Return from the Wilds. These two are separate effects that will resolve in sequence if chosen, and each of those texts will be replaced to include an additional food token, or whatever, depending on your replacement effects. Spring Art Nantuko can also be interesting. Of course, a landfall effect that makes tokens for 1 and a green is quite fair on its own here, but bestowing it on a creature is a nice harmless extra. For me, at least. Here's a few targets that will scare the hell out of your opponents if you get to keep them enchanted for a couple turns. Galagritters triggers when its copy hits the field, and each time I copy it, the more triggers I will get. The treasures come in tapped, of course, but after the first couple copies they will refund the landfall cost. One other who is faster at paying for its own copies, Tireless Provisioner, triggers at the same time the Nantuko, and the treasures come in untapped. Same goes for Academy Manufacture. The landfall copy effect creates a token, so Peregrin Took adds a food to it, which the manufacturer itself can turn into its trio of tokens, which include the treasure. I am proud to say I did my own work on this section, running this query on Scryfall periodically to check any card in green mentioning tokens and selecting the best ones I could find for my brew. Moving on to the next course of the meal, there is not much ramp in this deck, at least not in the conventional way. I don't run the usual package with classics like Nature's Law or Cultivate. My rule of thumb here is that in the first turns of the game I'd rather set up a couple synergy pieces before dropping Peregrin Took, so I can immediately kickstart the food production when the commander hits the field. In this sense, the aforementioned Peregrin Brandybuck is a much better turn 2 drop than skipping from turn 2 to turn 4 by ramping, as Mary will immediately let me create 2 foods on turn 3 after casting Peregrin Took, then 4 more on turn 4, provided I can have safe attacks. There are just a couple cases that incidentally can count as early ramp, but they are here mostly because of their quality as token producers. I'm talking about Gilded Goose and Awaken the Woods. Beside that, at least for me, it's been much better working up to achieving huge loss of mana on the following turns. Jaheira, Friend of the Forest, Night of Sweet's Revenge, Inspiring Statuary, Elven Chorus, Brightcap Badger, Growing Rights of Itlimok, or better, its backside, Itlimok Cradle of the Sun. These are a few cards that can leverage the tokens I created to generate a crap ton of mana to spend on all the cards Peregrin Took lets me draw. Pair these cards with all the replacement effects and unassuming cards can be turned into unexpected powerhouses. And Inekus Country becomes a ritual, while Witch's Oven does its best Phyrex and Altar impression. Too many excess green mana in your pool? Take a goddamn vacation straight to the Shire, or any other utility land that creates tokens. Even something simple like Many Partings can become a game-winning card with the right combination of effects on board. Edge of Eternities gave this deck a nice addition I'm trying out. Obviously, Lander tokens. Despite not being the best way to ramp, they can be woven seamlessly in the gameplay thanks to their inherent nature as tokens. Horizon Explorer is incredible on its own, but here it elevates to an even higher level. Yes, I would like to get 3 Lander tokens and 3 foods by attacking with my expendable token creatures, thank you. I did mention how having a card advantage engine in the command zone is powerful, but of course I can't rely on Peregrin Took alone. Besides the trivial includes, I have a few interesting picks I want to share. Please, if you are going to build this deck for yourself, include Trail of Crumbs. This can get lots of cards in my hand. Every time I activate Pippin's effect, I get to invest up to 3 mana for more cards while digging 2 cards deep, and it creates a food too when it enters. Chord of Calling is a bit of an obvious include in a tokens deck, but I want to mention it as it did influence other card choices a little. Since it tutors a creature directly onto the battlefield, this is a great way for it to be a sort of surprise instant speed second copy of Interactions on a Stick. I have a couple more interesting cards to showcase before moving on, starting Steel Seeker and Sir Ginger. These two can give you so much card selection! The wall of text on the Steel Seeker is essentially explored without the +1/+1 counters. Whenever an artifact enters under your control, you look at the top card of your library. Is it a land? Put it in your hand. Is it not? You can dump it in the bin if you don't like it, or leave it on top if you want. I want to remind you that Peregrin Took can be activated at instant speed, and therefore also in between Steel Seeker triggers. If in my chain of triggers I see a non-land card I like on top of the library, I can just sacrifice its 3 foods and voila! It is in my hand and I can keep digging with the Steel Seeker. This little trick works with Sir Ginger as well, and synergizes even better with Peregrin Took. Sacrificing 3 foods is part of the activation cost. Therefore, Surge Ginger's triggers will be put on the stack on top of Took's activated ability. You will then be able to scry one 3 times before drawing the card. And Surge Ginger is a food too, if you ever need that. My favorite card to pair with the Steel Seeker though is Ayola's Influence. Drawing a huge pile of cards already often leaves me with a surplus of lands, and activating Ayola's Influence with Peregrin Took on the battlefield gives me, you guessed it, even more Steel Seeker triggers from Pippin's Foods while going wide with bears. Plus, if you have any other replacement effects, things can get even more spicy from here. Interaction spells are the veggies of this meal. They are important, but there is not much else to say. Does it make tokens? Great! Does it synergize in any way? Awesome! Is it a staple that always works, or something that covers the deck's weaknesses? Let's go! Can it protect the board I am asked? Okay, there aren't many options for this in mono green. There are a few single target protection spells I did include. Besides, did you know that Jaheira can make the roll token from Royal Treatment tap for mana? The best of the bunch board protection spell in mono green is Heroic Intervention, which is expensive and I don't own, so it's not in the deck. I do run Wrapping Vigor as a gotcha protection spell, and Eldrazi Monument as a static indestructibility effect, which also pumps my boards and makes it evasive. This last card also partially answers the question, how do I close the game once I have a huge board of tiny 1/1s? Well, this is a green deck. It wins by smashing face, of course. Or combos, but that's not really what I was looking for. For sake of completeness, here's a tiny side dish section, which I'll name Cool Combos I Don't Like Playing, but you might, because you are not me, thankfully. Summoning Station is a 2-card combo with Peregrin Took. Sacrifice 3 foods, 3 Summoning Station untapped triggers go on the stack, tap it in between of those to create pinchers and foods, and bada bim bada bam, infinite pinchers and draw your whole deck. Add in Cloak of Omens to the deck and wow, is that a mere turbine I can untap? And tapping it with the Peregrin Took out creates 2 artifacts in the form of Mirror and Food, which can be used to reactivate the Cloak of Omens. Wow, great! Infinite mirrors, infinite foods, and draw your whole deck again! Hey, this one's a combo I used to run. And Queen with Peregrin Took, a token doubler, and anything that lets you tap foods for mana gets you guessed it, infinite insects and infinite food at instant speed, and yes, draw your whole deck again! You get the drill, including those cards warps the build around the combos, and once you draw your whole deck, you can just choose how you want to win. That's something I usually do not like, so let's smash face. Besides the aforementioned Eldrazi Monument, Sylvan Anthem is cheap and is a good bang for your buck. Knight of Sweet's Revenge and Jor-El can provide a temporary pump effect when needed, albeit at higher cost. Food and cards are 2 resources I rarely lack, so it's not unusual for these 2 to see X equals 10 or even more. Both Beastmaster Ascension and March of the World Ooze are fantastic here. I usually tend to treat them as sorceries that pump your board for the turn, that eventually stick around if not interacted with. Especially in the first case, I never drop it if I cannot immediately get 7 counters on it on the same turn. Motivated Pony is another great pump effect for this deck. I am still testing this one, because I never draw it, despite what I previously said on Card Advantage. I haven't really invested in granting trample to my creatures, counting more on the number of creatures I create. Fact that Champion of Lambert really appreciates, bypassing the trample problem with straight evasion. And then there's Triumph of the Hordes. Come on, cut me a slack, I already own the copy, right? I know you may be wondering, where's Displaced Dinosaurs? I played that card for a while, but most of the times it just messed up with all the effects like Jaira by giving my foods summoning sickness as they were turned into dinosaurs. The ceiling of this card is incredibly high, I am not denying that, yet I realized it was mostly a liability for me, so it finally got cut. But do not worry, Rampage of the Clans will do a fine impression replacing all those food tokens with 3/3 Centaurs. It's a classic after all, you can cast it on the end step before your turn and have an army immediately ready to alpha strike your opponents. I am pretty sure at this point you're pretty tired of hearing my voice, so let's wrap this up. As with my previous video, you can find the full decklist in the description below. Think I'm a dumbass for not including Wood Elemental? Feel free to tell me in the comments. You can also find me on Blue Sky if you want. That said, till next time. I know, I still don't really know how to close out these videos, let me get the hang of it, alright? It comes out just next November.